deal for United States President Joe Biden's son, Hunter Biden, collapsed in a dramatic court hearing where the judge could not approve the agreements. The Republicans have been banking on Hunter Biden's tax troubles for years now. Hunter Biden's lawyers now have 2 weeks to get a new deal with the prosecution for the investigation that has now been going on for almost 5 years. In the plea deal announced last month, Biden was supposed to be charged with 2 misdemeanour counts for failing to pay his taxes on time in 2017 and 2018, which amounted to $1.1 million, the other one being $1.5 million. More importantly, Hunter Biden's he was deferring punishment for lying on a gun license application. The main dispute centered around how much immunity from future prosecution the plea deal would give Hunter Biden. But right now, that remains in a limbo.
I would call this extremely unusual. I have seen it happen before once or twice, and generally that's for one of two reasons. One is if there's just a term where the parties don't really have a meeting of the minds on a particular term of the plea, then it might be set aside. That seems to be what happened today. Sometimes, too, it's that the defendant either gets cold feet or there was a miscommunication between the defendant and the lawyer. The defendant has the right up until the time that they enter the plea to back out of it. So I've seen that happen, too. But this situation where it's really that the defense counsel and the prosecutor don't agree as to what the plea means, that's incredibly unusual. It makes me wonder whether there was some oral agreement or communications that happened outside of the plea where, you know, maybe the government wasn't willing to memorialize in the plea that it wasn't going to bring certain charges, but maybe it made some representation that it didn't presently intend to, or something else to defense counsel, and then somewhat walked that back.
Hunter Biden is a private citizen, and this was a personal matter for him. As we have said, the president, the first lady, they love their son, and they support him as he continues to rebuild his life. This case was handled independently, as all of you know, by the Justice Department under the leadership of a prosecutor appointed by the former president, President Trump.
Now remember, the United States it's all set to head into presidential election in 2024, which is why these developments will hold a massive bearing as far as Republicans and the Democrats are concerned. Let's try and get in a political perspective, and for that, let me introduce my guests. I'm joined in by Stephen Golub, who's a political commentator, also joined in by Jean Valentino, who's a conservative strategist. Many thanks to you, Stephen and Jean, for joining in. Stephen, if I could begin with you, in fact, Jean, let me take this question from you first. There's been much chatter about how Donald Trump's legal troubles are bound to affect his 2024 presidency plans. But how will Hunter Biden impact Joe Biden's presidential performance and re-election as well?
Well, for 2024, I think don't blink, you'll miss a chapter, as they say. It's very volatile and changing as we speak. So I think that President Biden's chances of getting reelected are fading. Keep an eye on Robert F. Kennedy Jr., whose numbers in the polls are coming up on the Democrat side. On the Republican side, there's 6 or 7 that have qualified for the Republican debates next week. And but still, Donald Trump stands over 50% ahead of the pack, with the closest one, Vivek Ramaswamy, at around 18 to 20%. Right. But you know, a lot of us find ourselves taking on positions on issues without knowing all the facts. And I'm not accusing anybody here of not knowing the facts. But long before Donald Trump became president, his sons were involved in business deals all over the world, excuse me. And as a result, they were brought in on depositions and interrogations for weeks in an attempt to try to catch them on something wrong. Their political campaign headquarters was wiretapped and spied upon. And everyone's got a certain amount of wrongdoing here. Blame doesn't exist on one side alone. But to suggest that Donald Trump is spurring on this issue.
All right, Stephen, if I could bring you in on this bit, you heard what Gene has to say. He's saying that Joe Biden's presidency plans are in fact fading now. How do you see this in context to Hunter Biden's case?
I really don't think Hunter Biden's legal woes will impact Joe Biden's presidential performance or his chances of being reelected. This has been politically litigated so many times that it's kind of old news by now. The bigger news will be the prosecutions of Donald Trump, and the bigger news in the campaign will be foreign policy issues such as Ukraine, how the US economy is doing, so many other matters that are more substantive policy matters than what's going on with Hunter Biden. Yeah, if there are legal issues that affect the 2024 presidential campaign, it will not be Hunter Biden's legal issues and how they may directly impact Joe Biden. It'll be Donald Trump's very major legal issues, the trials against him and his possible convictions.
All right, we'll have to leave it at that. Many thanks to you, Stephen and Gene, for joining in on World 360.